Final Stop Brasil. Chapter 26. New problems, new affairs, Catherine. The rooms were cold, and the heater in the living room didn't work correctly. It was getting too hot. In any case, I needed initially 2 new heaters installed. Electric-powered ones were simply too expensive to maintain, so I decided for gas. But for gas heaters, it needed gas pipes to be laid. In this house, there was nothing. Kirsten's husband worked in the industry and offered to organize material underhand and install the heaters together with a colleague. The bathroom they would also immediately rebuild. I'm stuck in the middle of exam studies, and I didn't want to burden him with other things. Therefore, I accepted the offer. Still optimistic and zest for action, I bought the most expensive bathroom tiles, taps, towel holders, and toothbrush cups from most expensive crystal. For weeks we lived on a construction site, with dirt and dust everywhere. The little free time I had, I spent to clean. Poopsie didn't disturb all this. On the contrary, it was very exciting for him. When he found a hammer, he tried to swing, and I had constantly make sure he didn't touch things that were dangerous for him. During the weekends, Charles came with his people, so we had superfluity in the apartment, and I could forget to sleep at daytime. When Marco visited me in Skye, what he did more frequently now, we were observed suspiciously by the Guineas. Charles responded suspicious and jealous, as if he suspected something. Additionally, I noticed Kathy and Paolo were already constantly fighting after a short time. I knew it was less down to Paolo. Kathy was just too possessive with him, just like she had been with me. So she did it now with Paolo. When he went out on Saturday nights, it turned into a drama. At first I tried to convey, Kathy, you're 14. In this age, you're not allowed to go to the discos. Paolo is older than you. Let him go out from time to time with his buddies. It is all completely harmless. And I also have an eye on him when he's in Skye. I tried to joke. It didn't help. She clung to him with all her might in a way Paolo couldn't stand anymore. Geraldo, who initially visited me only a few times alone, otherwise only came with Charles and other friends, was now almost every day my guest, and I discovered that he not only handled Poopsie carefully and adoringly, but he was also a very good listener. If the weather was nice, the 3 of us went to the park, strolled about the fair of springtime, or just took Poopsie on a playground. Geraldo stood on my side when I was confronted with the drama which began as Paolo ended the relationship with Kathy. Rita, you know, I like Kathy very much, but I can't take any more. I'm sorry. She's taking the air to breathe from me. I have to cram for the entrance examinations to the university. But even this she won't allow. For all the love, but I won't let her destroy my future. I'm really sorry, Rita. There certainly is no better mother-in-law than you. I hope we still can at least be friends. I fully understood Paolo, because I knew my daughter. She could make life hell for someone. Paolo and I would obviously remain friends. Kathy freaked out completely. However, the following weeks were hell for me in every way. She forgot everything around her. The school, Poopsie, everything. When I worked at night in the Skye, it was Geraldo who now looked after Poopsie, and I knew I could trust him. Kathy disappeared, however, in the evening, came back in the early morning hours, began to steal again, this time in professional style. Armed with a pair of pliers, she entered the shops, put on trousers and other clothes, pinched with the pliers the security marks, and then marched with the stolen clothes she wore on top of each other out of the shops. That worked, but not always, and I found myself confronted by police and store detectives where I picked her up. Again, I paid for the fines she got for ticket fraud and also for my phone bill. She drove to such astronomical heights it made me dizzy. All talk was of no avail. I couldn't get to her any more. The worst thing, however, was she offered herself worse than a cheap whore from the street. Charles and his friends told me about it when I was sitting in the Sky at the cash, that Kathy was out and about with all kinds of guys, disappearing in some dark corners. The attempts of the Guineas, who meant only well to bring Kathy to reason, failed. Initially, it was for me so incredible I couldn't believe it. But when I fought once again with some Gambiers and forbade them the entrance, they shouted triumphantly, "Do you also fuck as good as your daughter?" One night in Skye, Paolo introduced his new girlfriend to me, Sabine. We liked each other from the beginning, and later we became best friends. For Kathy, it was not concealed that Paolo now had a new girlfriend, and everything was getting even worse. Whenever I tried to talk with Kathy, I just earned hateful gazes at me. And yet, before our home was equipped with heating and bathroom, she told me triumphantly she was pregnant. By whom, she didn't know. Why, Kathy, was the only thing I could bring out. I was finished and didn't know what to do. Kathy, 14 years old and pregnant. And this did not happen out of ignorance. I had long since told her the facts of life, and since Paolo even made her take a light anti-baby pill. At first, I had taken them both to task and asked them to additionally protect themselves with condoms to prevent any diseases. 1993 was the year when people began to think more about the AIDS problem and were aware of how dangerous this disease was, and not just the gay disease, as was claimed initially. At this moment, I felt totally overwhelmed and abandoned with everything. Also, Amir took his time to listen, despite his exam work, but he was also perplexed. Charles was not even in Hamburg, but far away in the south of Germany for his business. This was exactly what I liked about the Guineas. They improved their poor asylum assistance money not by drug trafficking or theft, but focused on education diplomas like Geraldo, and earned their money by honest work, and for this they sometimes showed much ingenuity. Charles, for example, was clever enough to discover a gap in the market in Hamburg and received by an intermediary in southern Germany hip-hop clothing, brand of the popular Karl Kenny. He had raging sales and traveled every couple of weeks to Munich to pick new models. The package was then delivered to my address. Thus, he was not available when I really would have needed him. To Marco, I distanced myself at this time. I had, by God, other worries. First of all, Kathy, and also the fact that with the renovation of the apartment, my savings were running dangerously low. I was on the verge of bankruptcy. When finally my bath shone in new splendor, with new shower, sink, toilet, taps, tiles were installed, in white with expensive decor, towel racks of expensive chrome with cast brass and the crystal toothbrush cups, and when all rooms had heaters, Kirsten's husband presented me the bill, 8,000 marks. I could hardly believe it, and it came to controversy over this bill. This was going so far that I didn't want anything to do with both anymore, Kirsten and her husband. On top of all evil, I had now to find as quickly as possible a substitute for Kirsten. This was by then probably about the lowest point of my life. Kathy and her pregnancy I would have to make a decision about very soon. With Poopsie, I didn't know where to take him while I was working, and was forced to take him to work with me. Moreover, the fact I had pushed my luck and had lost everything, all my savings for which I worked a long time. For it didn't need being a big calculator to know that I was threatened with a foreclosure if I wouldn't very soon resell this apartment. Geraldo was at this low point the only person who stood by me, who encouraged me, took me in his arms, and comforted me. He took care of Poopsie as often as he could. When I made the decision I would have rather spared Kathy to abort the pregnancy, she reacted dull, simply didn't care. I accompanied her to the gynecologist, who examined her, confirmed the pregnancy, and shook his head. Unbelievable. This little girl being pregnant. I can't believe this. Without difficulties, we got the indication for abortion and brought it more or less smoothly behind us. I felt more like crying than Kathy. With luck, I found quickly a new nanny. Unfortunately, she wasn't like Kirsten. Apart from Poopsie, she didn't look after her other children, but was herself a mother of a 3-year-old daughter. Thus, Poopsie wasn't completely alone and without other children. But I didn't feel comfortable with this situation. However, I started looking for a competent broker who would sell my apartment. Of him I was told what I already had known, that it would be virtually impossible to sell as long as we lived inside. Therefore, I did the inevitable and looked again for another apartment, for rent, of course. During those days, I was sitting around, like lost, many times, and cried my eyes out until Geraldo was standing in the door and comforted me. Rita, it can't come worse. There will be better times again, you'll see. But to sit around and cry doesn't help now. Look, Poopsie is already upset. Come on, let's go swimming together. Even when I was in the mood to do nothing, Geraldo ran me over with his good humor and optimism, and we just made trips with Poopsie, which also were for me the only right thing to tear me from my lethargy. For a short time I could forget my problems. When we were splashing about in the water with Poopsie, or we saw all the different animals in the zoo. Charles watched everything with suspicious eyes, and took me one evening to Geraldo's apartment. He shared with Charles, John, and recently with Eddie, a cousin of Geraldo. I hadn't been there before. Geraldo responded with much embarrassment when he saw me enter with Charles, and I quickly realized the situation. The reason for his embarrassment was his girlfriend Jojo, who was also present, and of whom I knew nothing until then. This was exactly Charles' intention, namely to change this. Charles never made a lot of words, instead he acted. The next time Geraldo turned up, it was a strange atmosphere between the two of us. First, we both were silent in embarrassment. But then I asked him if he wouldn't have problems with Jojo if he spent most of his free time with me and Poopsie. She doesn't need to know, right? Besides, we don't do nothing forbidden. We are just good friends, Geraldo said. Then he began to bring Eddie, his cousin, frequently with him, but I didn't like him at all. Why, I didn't know. It was just like that. He was nice and friendly, but that made no difference to me. My antipathy grew still when I noticed that Eddie tried to check up Cassie. Geraldo and I had an argument about it, and I asked Geraldo to stop bringing Eddie. Eventually, I gave him the choice. Keep your cousin away from my apartment, and especially from Cassie, or I'll simply do without your visits as well. Geraldo defended his cousin with the remark, Cassie would at least stay at home, and I had everything under control. I sought assistance from Charles, but this was vain. Because of him I heard the same. I was boiling with rage, and showed Eddie this every time he was with Geraldo or Charles in the door. Hey, you scrub! You really don't realize you are unwanted here. Or I ignored him completely. I brought Cassie even more up against me than she already was, and had to listen now. Leave Eddie in peace. He and I are together, and he visits me and not you. What should I do? I gave up, and concentrated on finding a new home for us. This time I was actually lucky. Not far from our current apartment, just a few streets away, but concerning the environment, the apartment was worlds apart. Bright and green, right in front of the Lake Barenfeld, was this apartment, in a charming and elegant house, offered by a broker. From inside it was incredibly beautiful and huge. It had a snow-white fitted kitchen with dishwasher, stove, and all the trimmings, a white tiled bathroom with bath and shower, a living room with a huge round arc in the wall, As entrance, a bright, spacious bedroom, to be reached from the living room through a sliding door, and 2 extra rooms for the children. In short, the apartment was too good to be true. So I asked the agent where the hook was, because beside me were only 2 other candidates, and that made me suspicious already. Of course there was a hook, and it was in the rental agreement. Fixed for 3 years with a graduated rent. Graduated rent? I didn't have the slightest idea what it was, but this I would learn now. The base rent would cost me 1,000 marks, but with each year increase by 50%. In other words, the following year I would pay 1,500 rent, and in the 3rd year already 2,000. Then we would sign a new contract with an initial rent of 2,000 marks. How much had to be paid in 6 years was quite clear to me, and that this was more expensive than property too. These bandits of proprietors wanted to enrich themselves by the Hamburg housing shortage. This fact already made me angry, but I was in a predicament, paid the 2 months rent deposit and 1 month rent agency fee in order to purchase as quick as possible, to remove my neck from the noose. The costs would be compensated by a violent overdraft of my account, then I would see further. Before we moved, and just before my summer vacation that I badly needed, I received a phone call at work from the new nanny, who informed me, completely dissolved, Poopsie had disappeared along with her daughter. I almost suffocated. "Call the police," I screamed into the phone. What made her cry more loudly as she sobbed? "That I have done, after we have searched everywhere. Now a troop of police is on the way. I'll be there in half an hour." I hung up, grabbed my bag, and was about to rush out the door when Frank, with whom I was alone in the office this morning, grabbed me by the arm and held me back. He had overheard the conversation and could think of why I was in such a hurry. "Calm down a bit first. It helps nobody if you cause an accident, excited as you are." But nothing could stop me, and I drove at full speed. In fact, I succeeded very badly to concentrate on the traffic. Instead, I sent quick prayers to heaven that nothing had happened to my Poopsie, and I would have him back safely. Please, please, don't let him be hurt. I could feel how my tears ran over my face, while all possible horror ideas came into my mind. Then I stood in front of the nanny's house, without even knowing how I had managed to reach there. I looked around and thought they lived immersed in the green, and behind the house began a rather large forest. When I entered the house, I found a woman in total dissolution, and a husband had also just arrived from work. Hopefully, I asked, "Does the police have a clue yet?" Both shook their heads, affected. How could this happen, I wanted to know, and the woman described in a trembling voice, "The 2 had played in the garden. I returned to the kitchen to take care about the cooking. Then the 2 disappeared from the garden." "How could you leave the children unattended in the garden?" I shouted at the woman. Her husband tried to calm. "Our daughter also disappeared. We do have the same worries as you." This, however, I doubted. Then we heard steps through the open entrance door, and 3 policemen entered the house with Poopsie and the girl on their arms. "We have found these 2 outliers very close on a side street, hand in hand. The 2 were walking along there," explained one of the policemen, laughing, whom I received my Poopsie from, and addressed the woman, "Either you keep an eye on the children or close the door to the garden, so that the children can't run out. It was open when we arrived, and therefore these 2 had walked out." With an icy glance, I looked at the woman, thanked the police, and left the house with Poopsie, without losing another word. Here I would not leave my Poopsie any more. Just a block away from our new apartment was a children's daycare center. I went there directly and looked at the house. Poopsie immediately vanished to the other children playing on the slides and monkey bars. A children's nurse came up to me. greeted me kindly, pointed to Poopsie, and asked, "Is this your son? He's so cute." Without further ado, I asked if I could register Poopsie here. "Oh, that's not so simple. To register is certainly easy, but we have waiting lists, and waiting time for a vacant place is 2 years. She kindly gave me information. I reported to be a single parent and relied strongly on my work. She took my information and promised to make an application to the youth welfare, but whether it would go quicker she couldn't promise me. As I was about to leave, I almost had the next cardiac attack. My Poopsie was high on top of a 2-meter monkey bar and amused himself with the older children. "Leave him be. He has to try out his own limits." The nurse held me back. "I think he already tested them today," I humbly replied. My next score was Kirsten. The money I had lost through her husband, and finally, because of that, the apartment, all had become unimportant. Only Poopsie was important for me, and I knew that the incident of this day would not have happened with Kirsten. She never let her day children a single moment unattended. Kirsten was more than pleased when we stood at the door and embraced Poopsie happily in her arms. Poopsie also beamed because he loved his second mom. We quickly agreed that Kirsten would take care of Poopsie again. She and her husband had, surprisingly for me, separated. I found it too bad, because for me this family was like a picture book family. I reserved one double and one single room at the beach hotel of Weissenhaus, sat the kids in the car and drove off with them to the Baltic Sea in order to have at least for 10 days a bit of distance from everything. Who knew? Perhaps this separation for a few days would change Kathy's opinion about Eddie, and I probably would get back at her again. Our rooms were comfortable, and only the different environment alone was already doing me some good. Poopsie and I shared the double room. The first 2 days the weather was glorious, and we spent them on the beach. Poopsie was no longer afraid of the sea, and even came with me into the water to splash about. For my taste, the water temperature of the Baltic Sea needed a lot to get accustomed to. It was simply too cold. I preferred to sunbathe on our blanket. Watching Kathy and Poopsie furtively as Kathy built a sandcastle for Poopsie, which Poopsie kept on destroying with joy, I thought, my goodness, she really is still a child. From the third day, we could unpack warm sweaters and raincoats, because it turned cold and rainy. But we wouldn't let this spoil our mood, and made rides to all the adjacent beaches like Grömitz and Malente. Went for long walks in the rain, despite Kathy's complaints. Poopsie had it easier by sitting in his light buggy I had bought for him. I took the kids to Puttgarden, where the big ferry boats were, and Poopsie was amazed how many cars disappeared inside the belly of these giant ships sailing to Denmark or Sweden. In rubber boots and raincoats, we marched to the donkey farm in Weissenhaus, and Poopsie rode on a small donkey. At night, when Poopsie slept, Kathy and I played some board games or watched a TV program. Coincidence was that my parents were passing their vacation at the same time at the Baltic Sea, and found the phone number of our hotel by Elke when they learned we were there too. So we met in Heiligenhafen, a fishing port, in order to take a common ship to Denmark, where duty-free shopping was possible. The reunion between the kids and my parents was joyful, but for me they became every time more strange, as if they had come from another world. We didn't have much to say to each other, and so I was glad that they were busy with their grandchildren. Unlike Kathy, Poopsie was very excited and enthusiastic on this stormy voyage, and he was rolling himself with laughter when Kathy was seasick and after several times throwing up, sat under the table with her hands covering her face. The duty-free shop brought a lot of chocolate, and it was worth it even for Kathy, who swore never again. This day was the only time we met my parents during their and our vacation. I preferred to spend the remaining days with the kids in the swimming pool of the hotel or in a closed water park. Kathy found amusement in the new play center, and when Poopsie had fallen asleep at night, I finally found time to read. But whenever I directed the conversation on the subject of Eddie, Kathy was sealed and blocked off. Recovered well and once again with the anterior team, Amir, Ralph, Bobo, and this time with Geraldo and Eddie, we moved into the new apartment where my furniture gave a very lost impression. For the time being, we would leave Poopsie's room empty, because there was nothing I could furnish it with, except his bed. Kathy's room was big enough for both, and she also agreed that Poopsie remained in her room. Meanwhile, I had almost gotten used to the fact that Kathy and Eddie were a couple. When one Friday night I was ready to go to work in Sky as always, Eddie asked me if I could give him a lift to Altona. Inside the car then, he began to talk some strange things, that he liked me very much, and things like that. I wondered what exactly he wanted. "I want to see you," I heard him say, and I still was not sure where he was getting at. But this changed abruptly when he took my hand and said, "You don't understand. I want to see you alone." I jerked my hand away, stopped at the roadside, and threw Eddie out of the car. During our late breakfast on Saturday morning, I was looking for words, initially, then finally burst out, "Kathy, Eddie is no good for you. There are so many nice guys around, but it really doesn't have to be Eddie. You're not going to be happy with him. Last night in the car, he tried to hit on me." Kathy looked at me like a ghost, but said nothing at first. Then with a hostile flash in her eyes, she screamed at me, "You are just making up this story because you don't like Eddie. What is this shit life for? It is somewhat so bad of you. It is almost perverse to be making up shit like that, only to separate us." She stood up and slammed the door behind her. I should have known it. She didn't believe me, and Eddie would deny everything in any case. I was pissed off with Eddie, with Geraldo, with Charles, but with him for different reasons. It had not remained hidden from me that he cheated on me again. In response, I took up meeting with Marco, who missed no opportunity to see me in Sky. This in turn called Charles' friends on the scene, who tried to tell me actually that I shouldn't be caught with another man. After all, I was with Charles' woman. I laughed sarcastically at the Guinness, and flirted yet more openly with Marco, who in any case made no secret of our affair. To greet me, he always kissed me, despite my protest, basically on the mouth, started to take me with him when he had a football match, and called me every day and night on the phone. I liked Marco very much, but as little as I was ready to marry Charles was I prepared to compromise on a serious relationship with Marco. One evening, my house was full, like usual, with Charles' friends. Only he himself was not there. When I heard the words of his friends, "No matter what, and with whom Charles prefixed something, he will always come back to you," to which I countered, "Well, equal rights for everyone, isn't it?" This evening, Marco called me on the phone to express an unusual request. "Rita, I have some friends visiting from outside. We just want to talk a little, listen to music, and drink a few beers. I told you how stupid my wife behaves. She doesn't like music, nor will she have my friends in the house. Can we come to your place?" Of course they could. I described the way, because until then Marco had never been in my house. Either we met in Sky or at Roland's, and then we went to our car park or a hotel room. Half an hour later, Marco arrived with his men and a crate of beer. The Guinness were taken by surprise, as the guys spread themselves in my living room. Marco naturally took his seat next to me, and put his arm around me. After a while he whispered in my ear, "You've not yet shown me your bedroom. I want to be alone with you." This amazed the Guinness even more when I disappeared with Marco into the bedroom. Marco was very intelligent, and to have conversation with him was more than interesting. He earned good money as a football player and made more than once clear that he wanted more than just a secret affair. He was serious about me. I don't love my wife anymore, and she has never loved me anyway. She used me to have a black child. Because they are so sweet. I love my daughter. That's why I'm still there. But if you want me, I'll get divorced. I want you for me alone," he said softly while he ran his hands gently over my body. "Give me some time," I asked him. And after we dressed and kissed us again deeply, we joined the party. I received devastating looks of the Guineas. Marco's friends, on the other hand, just laughed and made funny comments about our absence. Geraldo looked at me long and thoughtful, and although I didn't respond to his gaze, I could feel how he was watching me. The opening of the GDR border slowly showed all the disadvantages it brought. So much money was invested into East Germany. For the West, there was therefore hardly anything left. Among the Kohl and CDU-CSU government, the price, of course, was paid by the ordinary working class. Everything was more expensive. People were buying less. The economy had snapped. We felt it even in the harbor. Our repair orders lessened extremely, and before I managed to sell my apartment to have at least this double burden from my shoulders, I was given notice of my boss. There was no money left to pay my high salary. In order to save money, his wife would from now on step in again and take over my job. Unemployed, I didn't stay though, because before the expiration of my notice period, I found a new job in a big beverage logistic wholesale company. My former boss was not very happy because I left the company earlier than planned, so that no time remained to incorporate his wife into all the workflow. With a royal starting salary of 5,500 marks, I began to work in the payroll department. Unfortunately, I didn't win much from the high gross pay because I was no longer owner of property. Also for single parents, there were no more tax benefits. Under the Christian CDU, people had to be married to be able to enjoy tax advantages. It ripped a giant hole in my household budget. Nevertheless, I liked the new location, and it was a new challenge to calculate the wages of different pickup drivers in short and long distance with hourly fees, delivery drivers and warehouse workers, in addition to prepare the salaries. Part of my work area was the issuing of all certificates, completing employment references, creating statistics, to book wages and salaries, income tax, calculate health insurance fees, unemployment insurance, and transfer it to the appropriate authorities. Ultimately, to drive the month's end, sometimes differences had to be found if they should occur. The office I shared with Andrea, who gave initially a very strict impression, the way she looked at me from above her glasses, just like a typical accountant. But the more I got to know her, the more I liked her, and we always had some good fun at work. For me it was primarily a benefit that the company was in Hamburg-Bahrenfeld, practically in my neighborhood. But in my private life, I was still undecided. Charles I saw less and less. Geraldo continued to strive for Poopsie, and somehow I had the feeling even for me, for he appeared more frequently at night now when Poopsie was asleep and no one else was around. We talked about my plans related to this apartment, and I told him I had signed my name on a waiting list for social housing. This came with a graduated rent, I would join for a long time under no circumstances. What about Charles and you? Geraldo wanted to know then. At this time he was very distant to his friends, had cancelled the contract for the apartment, and was living again with his German foster mother. Where all the others lived, including Charles, not even I knew. Honestly, I don't know. Sometimes he comes over, then again he doesn't. I believe it's over, I said thoughtfully. And Marco? This I either couldn't answer, Geraldo. I just didn't know what I wanted. We listened to music from Blackstreet, and suddenly Geraldo took my hand and began to dance with me slowly to the romantic voice of Teddy Riley. We kissed like automatically and landed automatically in bed. It just happened. Geraldo was in no way comparable to Charles or Marco. He was rather small, wasn't any good looking, lived on low earnings of his gigs because he was in school, but there was surely something he had ahead of the other two. Poopsie loved Geraldo, idolatrous. Thus, all happened somehow by itself. Geraldo separated from Jojo, I separated from Charles and Marco, which both took more serious than I expected. Geraldo and I became a couple. Geraldo took care of Poopsie in a loving way, like no biological father could have done better, and Poopsie was overjoyed that Daddy, as he called him soon, stayed every night. Nothing was too uncomfortable for Geraldo. Like naturally, he changed Poopsie's diapers and cleaned up some unpleasant mess, like the night when Kathy crashed into the living room and cried in horror, "Mom, come and see the mess Poopsie has made." We usually left Poopsie alone to go to sleep, and Kathy had entered the room believing he was sleeping already. Geraldo and I stared in disbelief at Poopsie, who smiled at us brightly. His face was browner than usual. In his hair glittered also a suspicious brown. Pyjama, bed frame were brown as well, but the worst of all was the stench in the room. I almost threw up. Poopsie had this night, contrary to his custom, made his big business in the diaper, and then smeared it from head to foot. I had to howl when I saw the scale. It was Geraldo who heartily grabbed Poopsie and put him first along with his pyjama under the shower. Then he took everything off, soaped him thoroughly, washed his hair, while I emptied the bed, washed away everything with disinfectant, tossed the dirty laundry into the washing machine in order to wash it immediately, wiped the spots away from the wall, and dressed the bed freshly. As if I didn't have anything better to do after a long day work. As good as Geraldo was trying, Poopsie was still stinking bestially after the first shower, and so Geraldo had to repeat the total wash twice again, with terrible outcries from Poopsie, until he finally smelled civilized. After all that, Geraldo was still laughing. At that moment I tried to imagine Poopsie's biological father, Robert, and was pretty sure he would have taken the flight. Another time, Geraldo was forced to defend Poopsie to the last, and I learned this evening it could also be a disadvantage to live nearby an idyllic lake. Once again it was Kathy, who was already in bed this time, crashed into the living room. Poopsie had been asleep, and excitedly exclaimed, "We have a strange creature in our room. I think it is a bat." Horrified, I jumped up and crashed past Kathy. "And you leave Poopsie alone in the room? Are you crazy?" I cried, literally flying past her into their room, with Geraldo right behind me. I tore the frightened Poopsie from his crib, when I still saw how Geraldo opened his big black umbrella. The confusion was perfect. Poopsie screamed in outrage. It was completely new to him that his mother ripped him so brutally from his sleep. Kathy opened the door ajar, as secure, and we watched the following spectacle from behind the door. Geraldo chased the bat, and the bat chased Geraldo. We heard this weird fluttering, shrill whistles, and Geraldo, who swore like a drayman, jumping on the bed, then down again, the umbrella opened and closed, and Kathy doubled over with laughter. It wasn't easy to track the progression of events. It was just too fast. But I knew when the umbrella opened, the bat was attacking Geraldo. If the bat squeaked and we heard the fluttering and shrill whistles, it was Geraldo attacking the bat. When he jumped down again and cursed, it certainly was one round for the bat. After about 1 hour, he finally managed to chase the bat out of the window. Sweating, but with a victorious smile, he came out of the room. That's what I liked about Geraldo. He was always laughing.